When Mafia Don Dante Moretti discovers that struggling art teacher Sarah carries the bloodline of his greatest enemies, he doesn't just want her, he needs her to secure his empire. She wakes up married to a monster she's never met, trapped in a world where her blood is worth more than her life, and the man who owns her on paper is the same one who makes her pulse race with both fear and forbidden desire. But what happens when the captive realizes she might be more dangerous than her captor? Dante Moretti stood in his marble office, watching the city lights flicker below like dying stars. His fingers drummed against the mahogany desk where blood had been spilled more than once. The leather chair creaked as he leaned back, studying the photograph of a young woman with dark hair and tired eyes. Sarah Rossi. She had no idea her grandmother's secret would make her the most valuable woman in the city. 20 miles away, Sarah counted crumpled dollar bills under the harsh light of her tiny kitchen. $37. Not enough for rent, barely enough for food. Her shoulders ached from cleaning office buildings all night, and her day job at the gallery started in 6 hours. She pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears that wouldn't pay the bills. The charity auction at Morrison Gallery buzzed with expensive perfume and quiet power. Sarah straightened paintings and refilled champagne glasses, invisible to the wealthy guests. Then she saw him. Tall, dark-haired, moving through the crowd like he owned everything he looked at. When their eyes met across the room, her breath caught. His smile was perfect and cold. "You look tired," Dante said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. His voice was smooth as silk over steel. Sarah knew she should walk away, but something magnetic pulled her closer. He smelled like expensive cologne and danger. "I work 2 jobs," she admitted, accepting the wine. It tasted like cherries and something bitter underneath. "Not everyone can afford to buy art worth more than cars." He laughed, a sound that made her skin tingle. "What if I told you that could change tonight?" The room started spinning. Sarah's vision blurred as the wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor like her last coherent thought. She woke in silk sheets that cost more than her monthly salary. Sunlight streamed through windows tall as cathedral arches. Her head pounded as she sat up, still wearing last night's black dress. A man in an expensive suit entered without knocking. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, placing papers on the bedside table. "Your husband is waiting downstairs." Sarah stared at the marriage certificate bearing her signature in ink she didn't remember using. Photos scattered across the silk showed her laughing with Dante, kissing him, looking happy. She had no memory of any of it. "This is impossible," she whispered. The lawyer's smile was colder than winter. "The state of New York disagrees. You're legally bound to Mr. Moretti now. Welcome to your new life." Through the window, she could see iron gates and armed guards. Her old world had vanished overnight, replaced by golden bars and a husband who'd stolen her freedom while she slept. Sarah's first family meeting took place in a room where crystal chandeliers cast shadows like prison bars. 12 men in $1,000 suits sat around a table made from a single piece of black oak. Dante's voice carried the weight of death as he discussed territory like chess pieces, his fingers tracing invisible maps of violence. When he mentioned burning down Romano's restaurant, Sarah's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. No one blinked at the casual mention of arson. These men spoke of destroying lives the way others discuss the weather. The guards followed her everywhere. 2 steps behind when she walked the marble halls, stationed outside her bedroom door at night, their footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the silence. Sarah counted them during her sleepless hours. 8 guards on day shift, 6 at night, cameras in every corner except the bathroom. She memorized their schedules, their blind spots, the way they changed positions every 2 hours like clockwork. Her first escape attempt lasted 37 minutes. She made it to the garden wall before Marco Torino found her, his scarred hands gentle as he helped her down from the iron spikes. Mrs. Moretti, he said softly, you'll hurt yourself climbing like that. His smile seemed kind, but his eyes held secrets. Later, when the guards weren't listening, he slipped her a business card. FBI agent Sarah Chen. Call her when you're ready to be free, he whispered. But remember, freedom always costs something. Lucia Moretti moved through the compound like a ghost in designer clothes. Dante's sister found Sarah crying in the library 3 days later, surrounded by books she couldn't focus on reading. Marco isn't who you think, Lucia said, her voice barely above a whisper. His brother died in one of our wars. He wants revenge more than he wants justice. She handed Sarah a tissue that smelled like expensive roses. Be careful who you trust. In our world, even kindness has teeth. Sarah hated how her body betrayed her when Dante entered a room. Her pulse quickened like a rabbit sensing a wolf. When she fell, trying to escape through the kitchen window, cutting her arm on broken glass, he cleaned the wound himself. His fingers were gentle, careful, nothing like the hands that had ordered buildings burned. The antiseptic stung, but not as much as the way her skin tingled under his touch. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. Because you're mine now, he said, pressing a bandage against her skin. And I protect what's mine. The attraction scared her more than his threats. In the darkness of her locked room, she remembered the warmth of his hands, the way he'd looked at her wound, like it caused him physical pain. Stockholm Syndrome, she told herself. But her racing heart suggested something far more dangerous than survival instinct. The Moretti Foundation gala sparkled like a jewelry box filled with predators. Sarah wore a red dress that cost more than her old apartment, but felt like a costume for a role she never auditioned for. Crystal glasses clinked around her as she moved through the crowd of politicians, judges, and criminals who all wore the same expensive masks. When the microphone was placed in her hand, she saw her chance. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice shaking but clear, I need to tell you the truth about Dante Moretti. Before she could speak another word, strong arms wrapped around her waist. Dante's lips crashed against hers in front of 300 witnesses, cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. The kiss tasted like champagne and possession, silencing her words with a claim that needed no translation. When he pulled away, his thumb traced her bottom lip. My wife gets nervous at public events, he told the crowd, his smile sharp as a blade. The message was clear to everyone watching. She belonged to him, and anyone who touched her would pay in blood. Marco's betrayal came at midnight when Sarah thought she was finally escaping. Instead of leading her to freedom, he drove her straight into the hands of the Torino family. The warehouse smelled like rust and fear, and Sarah's wrists burned from the rope that tied her to a metal chair. For 6 hours, they asked her questions about Dante's business, his weaknesses, his bank accounts. When she refused to answer, Anthony Torino heated a piece of metal with a blowtorch until it glowed red as hellfire. Tell us about the shipments, he whispered, or we'll write our questions on your skin. Sarah closed her eyes and thought of Dante's hands cleaning her wounds. The rescue came with the sound of breaking glass and gunfire. Dante moved through the warehouse like death wearing an expensive suit, his gun never missing its target. Sarah watched him kill 3 men without blinking, his face calm as a frozen lake. When he reached her chair, blood splattered his white shirt like abstract art. His hands shook as he cut her free, and she saw something crack in his perfect control. Did they hurt you? He whispered. And for the first time since she'd known him, the monster looked afraid. In the hospital bed, Sarah's bandaged wrists reminded her how close she'd come to dying. Dante sat in the corner chair, his clothes still bloody, watching her like she might disappear. They wanted you because you're the last Benedetti, he said finally. Your grandmother was Antonio Benedetti's daughter. Without you, I can't claim the territories that rightfully belong to my family. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about business. Sarah studied his face, seeing vulnerability he'd never shown before. Maybe they were both prisoners now. The war came at dawn with the sound of breaking glass and automatic gunfire. Sarah watched from her bedroom window as black SUVs crashed through the compound gates, men in tactical gear pouring out like ants from a disturbed hill. Dante burst through her door, a gun in each hand, his face harder than she'd ever seen it. "The Torinos brought the FBI," he said. "They want us both dead or in prison." Sarah had 30 seconds to choose between the car waiting to take her to safety or the weapon he offered her. She took the gun. Her art skills became war strategy in the compound's basement. Sarah spread building blueprints across the concrete floor, her fingers tracing escape routes and weak points like she once traced watercolor landscapes. "They'll come through the east wing first," she said, marking positions with red ink. "But if we cut the power to sectors 3 and 5, they'll be blind." Dante watched her plan their survival with the same focus she once used to paint sunsets, and something shifted in his eyes. She wasn't his captive anymore. She was his equal. The final battle raged through marble hallways that echoed with gunshots and breaking statues. Sarah found Marco in Dante's office, standing over classified files with a lighter in his hand. "You could have been free," he said, his scarred face twisted with rage. "Instead, you chose the monster." When he lunged at her with a knife, Sarah didn't hesitate. The letter opener slid between his ribs like it was always meant to be there. As Marco fell, blood spreading across expensive carpet, she felt the last piece of her old self die with him. 3 weeks later, Sarah stared at the pregnancy test in her marble bathroom, the 2 pink lines clear as a verdict. Her hand moved to her still flat stomach where Dante's child grew, a tiny heartbeat that would bind their bloodlines forever. When she found him in his study, he was signing papers that made her a legal owner of half his empire. "Equal partners," he said without looking up, "in business and everything else." The ruby ring on her finger caught the afternoon light as she stood beside Dante on their balcony, overlooking the city that now belonged to both of them. Her grandmother's ring, taken from the man who'd murdered her, felt warm against Sarah's skin. Below them, the streets pulsed with life they controlled, territory they'd claimed with blood and bullets. Dante's hand rested on her growing belly, protective and possessive at the same time. She'd learned to love the monster, and he'd learned to kneel only to her. In a world built on violence and power, they'd found something more dangerous than hate. They'd found each other. Sarah Benedetti Moretti, no longer victim or captive, but queen of an empire where love was the deadliest weapon of all.